I'm in London, UK.
Oh, okay, awesome.
Yourself?
I'm on the east coast of Canada.
Oh,
Hmm.
it's on my list. Just curious, want to venture there one day.
Mhm.
You know, um,
I like to make a point that I don't mind our American neighbors, but I also like to always mention that I'm not American. Canadians take a lot of pride in being Canadian, so yeah.
it's interesting. So, may I ask? Oh, okay. So you're from America.
No, from Canada, yeah.
Oh, okay. You just tried to. Okay, okay. Sorry, I missed that one.
It's all good. It's all good.
Pardon me. Just hearing some. I was really trying to avoid using my what do you call it? I was really trying to avoid using my mic and stuff today, but
Right.
I think it's one of those days where you might have a bit of background noise and stuff. So I think it's wise I better put this thing back, put this thing back on. But it's great to finally, and thank you for coming through. Welcome to Poetry Journal podcast,
Mhm.
and thank you for sharing some of your time with me to have
Yeah, no problem.
this discussion. It's great to meet you, Ashton,
Mhm.
and you are a creative entrepreneur, graphic recorder. Could you tell us some more about graphic recording?
Mhm.
What's it like being an entrepreneur for you?
Yeah, so I attend a lot of meetings and conferences and presentations, and it's my job to be the listener in the room and listen to everything that's happening, everything that's being said,
Yes.
distilling that down, synthesizing that, and creating a visual representation of that information. So, using a combination of language, words,
Yes.
and drawings. So sometimes that looks like, when I'm in person, it looks like giant pieces of paper hung on a wall, like life size with my big giant markers,
Yeah.
and actually drawing it all out in real time. It also looks like when I am attending a meeting online, where instead of seeing my little face in a window,
Yeah.
you would see my drawing screen, and I would be drawing live in real time, but just on a digital surface instead of paper. So those are mainly the kind of two styles that I kind of work within, is analog or digital. But before COVID, I was 100% in person. So I had to move everything online. I was kind of forced into it, but it's been kind of like a blessing in disguise for me.
Hey, may I ask, what was the how did you, was it easier to do what you do? Did it make it more convenient? Was that where the blessing situation came in for you?
Yeah, I think the blessing was, I have three small children,
Okay.
and I was traveling extensively, and I was away from home all the time.
Mm,
And it was one of those things that you don't realize that's stressful until you don't have to do it anymore.
yes.
And when I didn't have to travel, I realized how, even though I had, like, there's the stress of like the world around me, I didn't have that additional stress of traveling. Um, I think traveling can be a little overrated when it comes to work, because you just, like, you're there for a couple of days, you come home, your sleep is all messed up, you're away from home, which is hard with small kids.
Yeah.
And it's being able to do what I do, but can also serve people in a virtual space.
Mm,
That's sort of where the blessing kind of came in, because now I can, put my kids on, like this morning, I put the kids on the bus, and then
yes.
I get to come and talk to you, right? So,
Yeah.
whereas, and I live very, very rurally, it kind of, you have to travel quite far to get anywhere.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
um, and I really love living in the country. So, yeah, it all comes with its pros and cons, good and bad. But
Absolutely.
so now I feel like, and I've been doing it long enough that I just sort of have like people that I work with ongoing, and I don't have to travel if I don't want to at this point, which is really, really nice. So the travel that I do is like very local. It's like a, maximum a couple hours of driving instead of like having to get on a plane and stuff like that.
I can hear balance. I can hear balance.
Try.
And that's a beautiful thing, it's very important. And I think it's clearly making a difference, so that's important. Okay, let me read something for you, and then we can have a bit more things to speak about. As it goes. Plagued by the telltales, they whisper through the colloquial codes to the brain cells. A sort of grapevine spiel, thus my mind stands to respect the appeal. Felt like forever seeing the world through a lens like a jigsaw, though through the years like an icy thaw, the ice caps starts to melt through what the cerebral saw. Suddenly the world is not so ice cold, thus it was somewhat warm. The sunsets no longer leave me dripping wet, thus I can smile at dawn. The time told was so ice cold, although I remain smitten through my terrain. Never forgetting the moments or trial like times and strain. Earthy gains, thus the crust of my tar-like skin didn't mean to grow more thick skin. Just a little snap I thought I'd share with you today.
I love that. I love that. I love when you use the word smitten. I was like, I love that word.
Yeah, I do enjoy it. Sometimes I really like that one because sometimes it's kind of like it gives that little onomatopoeic type of swing to it if you really know how to use it. Sometimes I would be like smitten. There's something catchy about it, And, that's just my thing. I love words. I can talk about that all the time.
I love that word because it paints a picture in your mind of what it is. Yeah. And I was thinking about it while you were talking about how poetry can paint that picture in your mind, and so many of us think in pictures, and I think that's why I love what I do too, because you can create this story in someone's mind and they are visualizing it based on their own lived experiences and what so people take away from it, whatever what they're hearing plus their lived experiences to paint that picture in their mind. So I mean that's really cool.
That's right. Well, I've always had this opinion where there's a commonality across when you talk about artistry, art forms, and we have different forms of expression, but we're all there's a commonality in terms of like what we're trying to express. We all have similar experience, somewhat unique, but for the most part is more similar than different. And so I think that just makes it, one of those you just mentioned is visual. And I think that just makes it easier for people just from different art forms to almost relate to what you have to say, in my opinion. It's quite the intrigue.
Do you find that you encounter people who say that they're not creative when you share your poetry with them? They're like, oh, I could never do that. Do you find people say that to you?
I think maybe not to say that they can't, but it's more the requirement of doing poetry in terms of like the level of vulnerability that comes with it. Some people are unwilling to open up to that extent, and sometimes it's just just being honest with yourself. Some people find that hard because that's one of pivotal things when it comes to speaking about poetry. You know, you have to kind of be candid. And then I've met recently. I spoke with somebody else, and they're artists themselves, but it's when it comes in terms of like the expression itself, when it comes to poetry, that's where like they're good with stories, but not necessarily, you know, depicting a piece for poetry. It's almost like somewhat alien to them. I suppose in a sense, I've always thought it's a little bit eclectic. And you have to be somewhat meticulous to kind of grow with it and mature to a point where, man, regardless, you can kind of always speak on your experience in a certain way, something like that.
Yeah, I find poetry really interesting art form because it's one of the few that you can't hide behind. Right? You just like you spoke about that vulnerability, and I think that's so true because I feel like for years I hid behind the visuals that I would create for people. Right? And sometimes I would joke, like when I'd be in the lunch line, you know, like because no one ever sees my face. They always see my backside, you know, because I'm you know, facing away from looking at the paper drawing. And you know, even if you were like an author of the book, you don't have, like, unless you decide to do an author reading, which is, you know, still going to be a very minimal amount of putting yourself, like putting your work out there. But poetry, it does, like, you can't really hide behind it. Like, I guess you could publish it but never read it, but that doesn't really like lend itself naturally, I guess. But yeah, I think, like, you know, like I've certainly just kind of come to realize that this now, where I'm trying to be more visible, and in my work, and not like hide behind what I've created. And it is like the visibility is very scary. It feels totally like, it just feels totally different, and it's very hard to describe. And I find that people, like, when I've said that and shared that with people, they're really surprised. But because, like, sometimes I'm on stage and there's like thousands of people in the room or virtually looking at my work and seeing every mistake I make, but that doesn't make me scared in the sense I think it did when I first started, because I'm not like, you know, looking at all of their faces. It feels totally different. I just sort of, you can kind of block it out. And be like, you know, because you can't see anybody. But when you face people, like, I have spoken on a few stages, and it's like absolutely terrifying. And it's funny when you describe it to people, they don't understand, because they're like, well, you're on the stage when you're drawing. And I'm like, yeah, but it's totally different, because you're like in the zone, you're like in the flow. You're not like, you can kind of ignore everybody else and just listen to what people are saying, right? So I think that's interesting.
No, I agree. It's different, but with poetry, you know, there is no hiding, especially someone like myself that's been performing it. I think just over a year and a half now I've been doing it, and to that extent, it's almost like there is no hiding, and you kind of have to, you get to a place where it's almost like you have to be so content and happy with what you're putting out there, or with yourself, because you know, this comes with judgment, and people are gonna think what they think, and you kind of have to be all right with whatever comes with that, because, you know, everybody's entitled to their own opinion, and not everybody's going to have something good to say about what you're going to express. And so you kind of have to just be all right and just kind of face your own demons, in a sense, before you you know, you show that to somebody else. So yeah, it is like that. I think to a certain extent, maybe when I was when I was younger, when I was writing late teenage years poetry, I was skilled enough to maybe almost speak in codes in a sense, you know.
Right.
Speak in codes, so it's almost like, oh man, I can blanket and just cushion some of these expressions, these deep things I'm trying to say. And you have to have the know-how, or kind of maybe know me enough to kind of decipher some of the words and some of the sentences I'm kind of putting together. But you know, I've kind of matured past that, where it's almost like I've learned to tell it like it is, to an extent, and I'm just all right with it. And it's almost like you like it, you don't, you know. But it takes growth and time to really develop, to kind of just see it like that, you know, and you just honest with it. Yeah.
The last poem that I wrote was quite a long time ago now.
Oh.
And it was my oldest child is 10, and it was when she was born. And I was really struggling being a new mom. And I really wanted to be a mom. Like, that was when everybody said, what do you want to be when you grow up? I just wanted to be a mom. And so I had her, and she was a tough little baby. Like, out of the 3 of them, she was definitely the toughest. She cried for no reason. Like, she was a tough one. She was real tough. And I remember feeling all these feelings about, this is what you wanted. Like, you wanted to be a mom. So why are you, like, I was really wrestling with this. This is what you wanted. But now that you're in it, you're like, oh crap, what did I just do? I don't know what I'm doing. It's, you know, I'm sleep deprived. I'm feeling awful. Like, I don't always feel motherly love all the time in this little baby. Like, I can't figure out what it wants. And you know, so the only way that I could, like, express in that time how I was feeling was by writing a poem about it. And it was these, like, I don't even know what I did with it. I'll try to find it someday. I don't even know where I put it. But it was, I just, like, needed to write out these, like, two opposing worlds that I was in at the time of, like, you know, when you get your desire and you get the thing you want, and it's not exactly, you know, all amazing and stuff that you thought it would be. So I kind of wrote it from those kind of, like, 2 perspectives of, like, you know, this is what you wanted, but you're also being really hard on yourself because this is stuff, right? So, and I did write a lot of poetry when I was a teenager. It was very angsty. It was very negative. But yeah, I don't know why in that moment I was like, I need to express myself and I don't know how. So it had been several years since I had written anything like that. And I was just like, I just need to put pen to paper and figure. And that was before I even started doing what I do. So, you know, putting pen to paper was something that didn't necessarily come naturally to me at the time. Because I was putting myself into positions where I wanted to elevate other people's artwork and voices. Like, I started an art festival, I started an arts organization, but it was really about helping others, and it wasn't about my own creative art forms. And so yeah, it was definitely an interesting experience to do that. So yeah, I'm glad I did it, and I'm sure, hopefully I'll find it someday. I don't know what to do with it, but yeah.
It sounds interesting. With your art form, how did that come about? Was it just something you just naturally just had there, and you know, it was like a hobby type of thing, or it was something you intentionally went out to discover about yourself, like what was for me kind of thing?
Yeah, so the thing I've always been very creative. I call myself a dabbler because I've tried so many things, and some things I would do for a week and some things I would do for a year and then get tired of it. But it wasn't until I found what it is that I do today that I was like, I want to dedicate my life to this. Like, this is what I want to do, and I want to do it all the time. And I want to like try to build a business around it. Like, and I think because I got into it less from a creative standpoint and more of a helping people communicate standpoint. So I learned about this as a facilitator. And as a facilitator, you're really about creating safe spaces for people to have conversation, to come to their own ideas. And you're not the one holding all the information. You're the one asking the questions, right? Tell me more about that. Has anyone else experienced this before? Right? And getting that dialogue going and doing it in a way that people feel safe to share. And then when I learned about you can do that, but add a visual element to it, I was like, this is so, I felt like it was this beautiful coming together of this, you know, communication, facilitation, creating safe spaces for people, and this sort of like creative side that I've always played around with, but never really considered it as like, oh, I could do this as a profession, right? Because there's so much rhetoric in my community and in my family about like the starving artist and all of that, right? So I just started seeking out people who do this type of work and looked for the evidence that it was possible for me. So, you know, because you can look for evidence about anything to back up how you feel about anything, whether it's good or bad, right? So I really focused on trying to surround myself and pay attention to people who were doing this work, you know, full time, all the time. So yeah, and that was 10 years ago. So.
So it's fair to say you had like you found a blueprint to, you know, where you wanted to go to and take it.
Yeah, like I think everybody's approaches to doing this is different and everybody's style is different.
Yeah.
Right? There's a blueprint in the sense that it exists in the world, but the way that everybody does it is really unique and individual to them. So I think so there was also this process that I had to go through those first few years where I had to lean in on who I am and what I am presenting in these visuals, because you can get intimidated by somebody, or you can take that, or you can be inspired. So I really tried to, every time I was intimidated, when I would see somebody who does this type of work, I would try to not look at it and be intimidated, but be like, wow, look at them like on that stage, and wow, look at them, you know, in that small group, like facilitating that cool conversation, like looked amazing, right? So, you know, seeing that if it's possible for them, it's possible for me. So I just had to kind of also be like head down a little bit and not get too distracted or not get into a space where I was comparing myself to others, especially when I started out and I was being surrounded by people who had been doing it for a very, very, very long time. And it is challenging not to compare yourself to others in that space, especially when you're getting started.
I would imagine. But man, it sounds like a great journey, you know. What and also very therapeutic. What are some of the blessings or fulfillment that you get from what you do currently?
Yeah, so I really like it when I have that opportunity to be in a space where I can draw out someone's idea or feeling or thought about something, especially when there's someone who doesn't always have a voice.
Yes.
So we often can end up in these meetings and these situations where you feel like you're just there because someone needs to check a box about something, right? And so there's like such an honor to be there when someone comes up to you and says things like, one guy came up to me one time and said, I've worked here for 40 years and no one has asked me how I felt before.
Whoa.
Right? Or like, one time a group of guys came in and they made it very clear that they were unhappy to be there. Right? So I'm like, okay, gotta win these guys over, that this is not just like a typical meeting. Like, we actually care about what you have to say. So they made a little joke and I drew a little picture based on their little funny little joke. And then at the break, they came up and they pointed and they laughed, right? And you can like win people over by being like, no, we actually care about what you have to say. See, we even included your little joke here. That's how much it's meaningful for you to be here, right? So, and oftentimes I'm in situations, I've been doing a lot with like Indigenous communities here in Canada, and they typically don't always have the strongest voice in a room or at the table. So it's important for me to also like honor what they're saying too. And sometimes I'll have them come up to me and say, can you write something in my Indigenous language? Like, here's the word and the spelling. And so for that, not just like surface level inclusivity, but like diversity for diversity's sake, but like truly be there to try to represent what is happening, what people are saying. And sometimes I have to capture things that may be perceived as negative, but that's what people are saying. So I cannot filter, and I have to sometimes warn the people that I'm working with, like, if people are, airing grievances, I have to capture them. Like, I cannot filter out the quote unquote bad stuff because you want a pretty picture. Like, that's not why you like asked me to be here, So I'm really trying to be the advocate for the people in the room when I am in those situations, and less about, what it's, it is like the process over the product at that point. And sometimes the picture isn't always like quote unquote beautiful or cohesive, but I'm like, conversations aren't always beautiful and cohesive. So like, it's a true reflection of what was discussed, right? So, I'm just trying in like my small way with my, passion for this and skill set to try to do and be a support for people the best way that I can be.
That's very intriguing. But I guess I'm curious about, there's one way where it's almost like, okay, we know what it's like and the effect we're having for other people, but let's explore the other way. Like, how do you feel like some of these relationships that you've bridged over the years, and just in terms of like mentorship or just just kind of growing with people, how do you feel they have contributed to your life in a sense over the years?
Let me just clarify the question. How mentors have contributed to my life, or just, if you don't mind.
No, I'm speaking of like more like people that you've kind of almost guided. Say if you were the one doing the mentoring, how have they almost in terms of like fulfillment, because we get something from it, and for the most part you're trying to do for other people. But I guess what I'm saying is, how has doing for other people, how has that indirectly done something for you?
Yeah, I think overall, like, I am a very empathetic person in general. Like, I'm very sensitive and I wear that with honor. You know, being a
Mm,
sensitive person is not a bad thing. And I think it has like made me passionate and opinionated about things that I might I, I'm not sure how to say this, but you know, there's most people, all they get to do is read a headline of an article and then they form an opinion about something, right? So I have this beautiful opportunity that instead of just reading a headline about an issue, I get to sometimes spend 16 hours listening to people with lived experience about a
mm,
particular issue, right? So it makes you very educated in a short amount of time about particular issues.
yeah.
And it is, I feel like that has made such an impact on my life when it comes to kind of how I move in the world, because I never really just take anything at surface level
Mm,
before I form a deep opinion about something. Like, I really want to, if I don't feel like I have enough information, I don't want to share my feeling about something,
yeah.
because, you know, hour 4 into that conversation, I'm going to feel different than at the end of hour 16, right? So, and I do have this beautiful opportunity to be in these situations where these conversations are really infused with a lot of like generational traumas and things, and you don't necessarily know and can form an opinion about something unless you hear people with lived experience. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I feel like, you know, being in those types of situations in my work is like such a blessing and such an honor to be there trying to help them represent what they're feeling and what's going on for them.
Yeah.
You know, so I definitely like hold that in as much reverence as I possibly can. But then I think it's just sort of made me very, I don't want to say cautious. I'm not sure what the right word is, but just very, just take a pause on everything that I listen to and hear before I like get upset about something or what have you. And I find I end up like educating other people in my life about issues that I've learned about
Yeah.
because of it. So, yeah, I think that's probably been the biggest impact in my life,
Mm,
for, you know, listening to these types of conversations and being able to hear people in the conversation and not just like an article or a headline or something like that.
yeah. Yeah. That's intriguing. So many gems. I really love what you're saying. We're gonna wrap up soon, but I want to ask you one more question.
Okay.
How important is empathy for what you do and how you interact with people and almost evaluate their situation and knowing how to kind of tread through and not step on toes or have to walk on eggshells in a sense.
Mhm. Yeah, it's definitely incredibly important, and there has to be an element of your empathy that is vulnerable, in the sense of, you know, asking people for clarification about something, right? Like, I'm not perfect in the sense of like, I'm going to hear what you say and
Mm,
I'm listening to it with my own bias and my own lens,
yeah,
right? So sometimes in rooms, I have to ask for clarification or ask them to describe it or give me an example. You know what I mean? And I think that's what empathy is like not taking things at face value and digging a little deeper into what's actually happening,
yeah,
which I guess maybe kind of plays on all the stuff I just said. But um yeah, you like, I'm just a very empathetic person in general.
mm,
So, but it's sometimes uncomfortable to ask people to repeat something in a different way or just ask for clarification about something when they're retelling something that is not a fun experience for them, right?
Yeah.
But you know, because I think that asking for clarification, I think, is part of my empathetic process of, I want to truly represent what it is you're saying or how it is
Yeah.
you're feeling. And, you know, when people are emotional or things get heated or whatever, like sometimes you listen to the words, but not what they're actually saying. That makes sense. So
Yes.
you have to kind of like balance all of that and put yourself in a potentially vulnerable situation where you're asking people to repeat themselves or asking for that clarification. And I feel like that's just rooted in the caring part of the work, because I could just like listen to it, draw it, and be done, you know? But to really care about what it is that they're sharing sometimes requires an additional conversation or that clarification piece.
Yeah. That's interesting. I guess for me, I think what I'm trying to convey through my poetry, or what we're speaking about today, is the knowledge of self doesn't come easy. Even more so, the understanding of yourself as a creative, and then the means to be resourceful to make what you want to do happen for yourself. However, it is not impossible. Sometimes it begins with trying, and a force stronger than yourself will guide you, you know, because like anything else, once you start a journey, life is destined to almost literally encourage and figure ways to ensure you finish that journey. So that's why I resonate with a lot of things that you said, where it's almost like, you know, in the beginning, and you seek out people that do what you do, or did similar things that you're trying to, they're at similar places that you're trying to get to. And you know, it's just, and so it's kind of like it put you in a space where you're picking up gems constantly and you're constantly growing. And you know, it just put you in a space where, oh man, it's not so impossible. And you learn to kind of almost magnify on the niche that you're looking for yourself. Because there's one thing being a creative, but then there's another knowing specifically, mapping down exactly where you belong in that whole world, in a sense. So I really enjoyed what you had to share. It was interesting for sure.
Good. Yeah, I enjoyed it too. I loved the direction that we ended up going in the conversation. So yeah, I really appreciate it.
Absolutely. Ashton, thank you so much for spending some time with me.
No problem.
It's a pleasure. I would love to have you on again. So hopefully we'll keep in touch, and
That'd be great.
We'll be able to do this again. Thanks so much.
Love it. All right. Have a great rest of your day.
Same to you. Take care.
Thanks.